Hello, everyone. That Weems guy here, along with John Hearne and Eric Gelhaus, and we have absolutely no plan for the show tonight. We're just going to start talking and see where we get. John, tell everyone hello.
Hello, everyone.
Eric,
Hello, everyone.
I would think that most of the audience has listened enough that they're going to know that you are, and we can start from there. Although we did mention Eric, so let me take a sip here. All right. So we do have two topics in mind to discuss, and then we'll just kind of see where it goes from there. First is David Cagle shared an article with the three of us earlier this week, and David's not here because we're recording at 9 o'clock on Sunday night, and that's past his bedtime. Um, David sent us an article that the
I mean,
Pennsylvania State Police had pulled shotguns from service, and I believe it was one of their troopers was killed by a pellet from another officer. And I should see Eric. Would you like to take over?
I don't know if it was if it was a trooper. I don't
Yeah.
know if it was a single pellet. I've heard both. One of the problems is, and this has come up in some other things I've done recently, is I don't know the details on the event, right?
Right.
How many pellets hit the officer, the trooper? Um, was it an actual miss? I'm not talking an over penetration, but like, did he catch a full charge because the whoever fired the shots completely missed the suspect? Um, was it an assigned gun? Was it a rack gun? Had it been patterned? Was patterning even part of the training process? Right. There's so much I don't know that it's real difficult to have a discussion on it. Um, all of those things need to be included in training. One of the things my org did way back when we started allowing personally owned guns, it was making sure everybody understood the pattern. And as we started issuing guns out to folks and eventually issuing everybody in the organization their own 14-inch 870, was they needed to understand the pattern with the duty ammo. Now, I last I heard they're pulling those guns out of the office, but a lot of that's because shooting on an indoor range with frangible ammo only, folks had no idea how they were going to pattern. Right. So once we got past new deputy orientation, they weren't shooting their guns with their duty load, right? They were shooting frangible buck inside, and that creates a whole separate situation. But going back to the Pennsylvania thing, without knowing the answers to those questions, it's hard to talk specifics. I can only talk generalities.
Yeah, yeah. In general, I think the three of us would agree that law enforcement firearms training is substandard. Uh, then I think we need to throw shotguns into the mix. Training on shotgun is worse than substandard.
Yeah,
I would say of all the weapon systems, it's definitely the worst. I mean, there are volumes of information on all the various weapon systems that we've accumulated over the years, and I would say of all the weapon systems out there, the appreciation and understanding of what it takes to make a shotgun run is probably the lowest in the police service. I mean, the initial training is almost non-existent, and there's nobody with the specialized knowledge unless somebody has a deep curiosity and they look out for it itself, which is frustrating because there's plenty of good information about the shotgun. It doesn't take very much to find it. It just seems to be largely absent within police training circles.
Yeah, Eric?
part of it's the gun, the actual like physical layout of the gun and how they've come in and stayed in LE. Um, you don't see agencies adopting the advancements as quick as the civilian side is, right? You still see overly long stocks versus what the decent normal human being side, the non-cop side, is doing with Magpul stocks or shorting stocks or some of the other options out there. Um, Mossberg is one entity that is, I think, really tried to address this with their pro series of guns, right? Going to what they call like a bantam stock because they can't call it a youth model because of some of the issues that have been out there of late. But going to a much shorter stock on the factory guns, right? Trying to remediate some of the issues that have been seen out there.
It seems like in my police academy, I fired 5 rounds of double up buck to the shotgun, and then really got no other specific training on it, like at the agency level. And then all of a sudden we have shotguns in the cars due to circumstances I don't need to get into now. And it's like they were general pool issue thrown into the back of a car. Um, and like they expected people just to be able to know how to get them out and use them.
Yeah.
And then I had an interest in the shotguns, so I went to the state training center and went to the shotgun skills class, and then later went back for the 40-hour shotgun instructor class, um, and started doing some in-house training on shotguns then. But still, it was, of all the weapon systems that we have, or whichever term you want to use, it was the least amount of attention was paid to them whatsoever. Because back then, the state didn't even require qualification on them. And later,
No, I'm just, if you look, when I came on, the LE guns were a pump action shotgun, which you manually loaded, manually operated, manually unloaded, and a
mhm,
revolver, which you manually loaded, manually operated, and manually unloaded, right? They
yep,
worked alike. There was a significant percentage, I won't say it was the majority, but there was a significant percentage of people in the profession who grew up hunting with those guns.
mhm,
And the manipulation, the handling was intuitive, but we we didn't see an emphasis on running the safeties with them. We didn't necessarily see an emphasis on operating them from cruiser or closet ready in all of the training. Like it was shown, and then it was just kind of presumed that you would know how to pick the gun up. Safeties, using the safety on them, you don't need to do that. And we can't teach people how to do that.
yeah,
Right. So there were a lot of things that weren't done with it. I got more training on the shotgun in the academy than you did, but not what I would consider a reasonable amount. Right,
yeah,
kind of looking at it now, trying to develop programs. Um, I didn't get a reasonable amount, and down the road, I started going and taking classes, traveling stuff from guys at LA Sheriff's Department, then Gun Sight, then LAPD, then Louis Auerbach, then Scotty Reeds, right, and folks along that line. There in the agencies that have retained it, I don't think there's the emphasis on it that there should be. I'm not saying all of them. There are certainly agencies that were heavily influenced to use the shotgun the right way that
yeah,
did train it. And now, unfortunately, there's less knowledge. We have the people we're hiring don't come from a background of manually operated firearms, right? Which kind of presents a challenge for trying to maintain the shotgun because the pistols and the patrol rifle work the same way. Put a box in, right?
mhm.
Pull the thing, press the thing, pull the box out, pull the thing back, right? They both operate the same way. Um, I would, for an agency that was going to do it, I would treat the shotgun the way we treated patrol rifles in the early and mid 90s. You had to want to do it. We had to want you to have one of those. And then we were actually going to teach you how to use that thing to the limits of its capability. Um, the patrol rifles we started out back then requiring multiple headshots at 100 yards. Right, we need to treat the shotgun in a similar fashion.
Yeah, thinking back to when I first graduated the academy and went on patrol, we didn't even have shotguns in the cars.
Mm-hmm.
They were locked up in a safe at the office, and this shift supervisor had the combination to the safe, and apparently they were just going to magically appear if we needed them. Then, as world events happened, um, it got to be where we had two shotguns per shift, and they were in a zippered, padded pouch, and they were passed among the corporals at shift change. So if you were the day shift corporal, when you came in, you handed your shotgun, the one that you had, to the evening shift corporal, and we had to sign them on a log. And if there wasn't a corporal, then a senior officer was chosen to get them. And then that graduated to, we got a mount put in each trunk of each patrol car, and a shotgun went into each vehicle. Um, Unfortunately, where they chose to put the mount, um, if you opened the trunk, if there was any rainwater or something on the trunk, it dripped in and was starting to rust the shotguns. And we tried with the ones that mounted to the trunk lid, but they were vibrations. They were wearing out the bolt holes. And so ultimately they got inside the cab mount, and put those in. And by that time, we had rifles, and both of them um, were in the passenger compartment. I only recall two deployments of the shotgun back in those days. One was me, and one was another guy that was on about the same time I started. Well, a third. There was a third where a pack of dogs got into a flock of sheep and were killing a bunch of lambs and sheep, and one old country boy officer put a stop to that very effectively with a shotgun. But once the patrol rifles came on, we did a training where I was doing shotguns in the morning, someone else was doing rifles in the afternoon, and I watched shotguns die that day on the range. Um, People having difficulty loading and unloading the shotgun, just not understanding it. You show them how to properly, mount and hold the shotgun, and they still wouldn't do it, and they were
Hmm.
getting beat up by the shotguns. And then all of a sudden, you hand them this little carbine that loads and unloads like their pistol does, and it's pew pew pew, and no recoil. And it was like shotguns died
Yeah.
that day. And that agency ultimately um, took all the live buckshot away and started putting less lethal in the shotguns. And there's no live shotguns out anymore.
And having watched less lethal 12 gauge ammo
Mm-hmm.
perform and evolve over the years and perform, I am absolutely not a fan of 12 gauge less lethal. If you're going to do the less lethal, go with a 40
Yeah.
millimeter, even if it's a single shot, which actually has better muzzle velocity than the multi shot ones.
Yeah.
But for less lethal, go with a 40. There's still a significant benefit to the shotgun. These days, I would run semi-autos,
Mm-hmm.
right? I like the Mossberg 940 Pro Series, but we still aren't a year into those things on the ground yet, right? Come January, talk to me, and I'll have a much better an opinion with a much better foundation. Um, the Beretta 1301s are rock solid guns that are well proven, but they're expensive. The A300 Ultimate Patrol has a lot of things going for it, not the least of which is it costs about half of what a 1301 does. And then there's the Benelli line. Um, and those would be the ones I'd point people towards.
Yeah. When I was at the sheriff's office, being a shotgun advocate, I really stepped up the shotgun training there. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, I had the bully pulpit and could do it. Initially, had everybody in Remington 8 pellet uh, reduced recoil buckshot because that's what patterned the best in my gun. And so I made a very scientific decision, and that's what I bought. When federal flight control became a thing, I switched everybody over to that. Later, we had uh, a series of takeover armed robberies in the neighboring county, and I was waiting for my moment to strike, and I had a case of Brennicky slugs stashed away, and I had everyone that had adjustable sight shotguns meet me at the range, and we sighted them in for those Brennicky shotgun slugs, and that's how those got issued into the agency. And I've been gone for almost 2 years now, so I'm not sure what the current standard of that is, but I can understand from an agency perspective just saying we're going with carbines and pistols. I can actually understand that.
I, I can. Whether I agree with it or not is immaterial. I have
Mhm.
arguments against it, but it would be very much on the cadre level, like
Yeah.
the early patrol rifle stuff. And that's been my position for a few years now, is that if you want to do it, go with self-selection and agency selection out of that pool
Mhm.
and teach them really how to run that gun and take advantage of it. And we could go back and forth. We can do a bunch of arguments, but there's a number of West Coast agencies that still include a semi-auto shotgun in environments when other guys are running carbines. Right? There's a number of large West Coast agencies that realize there is a place for that weapon system, that platform, and the effect that it provides.
Absolutely. I do think it, as you're saying, it needs to be kind of a chosen thing,
Yeah.
not necessarily a fleet issue. Um, you're a gun guy. You're a
Yep.
shotgun guy. You know how understand how to run the shotgun. You know how to set it up. You know how to select components and ammunition for it. Then the same would apply to all three of us on here tonight. I feel perfectly capable. of going on patrol with a shotgun and being fine, absolutely just fine. Uh, I would go on patrol right now with a Beretta 1301 and my pistol and not feel undergunned at all, or an old 870p with sights and everything. Not necessarily the bead, but actual
Yeah.
sights. I feel perfectly capable doing my job with that. Um, but I put in the time and the effort and all to get to that point. I can certainly see where agencies say, from an agency standpoint, we're going to go with carbines
Mhm.
and pistols. And as a matter of fact, now shotguns are no longer even in the Georgia academy curriculum. If you're going to get shotgun training, it's going to be at the agency
Yeah.
level. John, you've been remarkably quiet. Do you have anything to say?
Well, I think that the shotgun fills a couple of niches that a lot of people don't appreciate. I get limited training time as far as that stuff goes, but I had a 14-inch 870 that rode with me everywhere, and it was there for vehicle work. It was loaded with Brennick slugs in the tube. It had Brennick slugs on the side saddle. And while nothing guarantees entry into a vehicle, that shotgun with Brennick slugs was about as good as you can get. The other thought that pops to mind is it's one thing maybe for an urban department, but for a rural department, I can't imagine having to put down, like I've had to put down a horse, I've had to put down a cow. When I first moved to my area, I tried putting a cow down with a 223. It was a suboptimal experience for me and the cow, um, as far as that goes. Um, uh, I've also put down a horse with a 12 gauge slug, and it just does the job. I had a buddy that actually killed a buffalo on duty, put 3 slugs in it as it was running, and the partner he was with, who was not quite as astute, had grabbed the M16 out of the rack, and we're all kind of looking at him going, at the time, our duty ammo had a picture of a gopher on the box. I'm pretty sure that if you've got the bullets designed for gophers, it was not the ideal buffalo tool as far as that stuff goes. Um, I just think it comes down to the simple fact of the matter that we don't get enough time to do this stuff. The competence and skill of arms is no longer a priority for agencies. It never was a great thing, but it now seems to have fallen squarely on the shoulders of the individual to seek out
Mhm.
excellence. You look at what we've done with our qualification courses, dumbing them down. We're just on I would call like a slow glide trajectory, but I think the curve, the angle's a little bit steeper than that, where just nobody knows anything anymore. It's just we're going to end up existing in a profound state of ignorance where the gun is nothing but a tool that makes a bunch of noise and kind of scares the bad guy off until the SWAT guys can get there and, talk him out of it.
Yeah.
One thing
Go
I'll
ahead.
say, John's talk about the buffalo. Where I used to work, they have a large animal park. They have several various African species, to include Cape buffalo. They have their own herd of Cape buffalo on the property there. During some major fires in 2017, there were serious concerns about having to evacuate that park or the animals getting loose and getting out of that park. And I can only imagine what a herd of Cape buffalo would do in a residential area, especially angry, scared Cape buffalo. And the local gendarme only had 223s. Now that place, we did have a bunch of Brennica slugs in stock, as well as other slugs from another manufacturer. But that would have made for an interesting evening, to say the least, in the middle of everything else that was going on during the fires.
Um, One of my former coworkers can attest that emus do not react well to being lassoed. And I will let that image just percolate and let everyone understand what might be the downfall of that.
Do they have claws?
I don't know. They have very skinny necks,
Okay,
and
I,
they
I'm
tend.
more curious about, like, if they decide to attack, aside from pecking you to death, like what they could do with their feet.
Well, when this one got lassoed, it tried to run away,
They'll kick you to death, dude.
Yeah,
I
that's
think they can kill you by kicking.
that's what
yeah,
I thought. Okay.
yeah. Thinking back, I mentioned that only the 3 times that the shotguns were deployed that I can recall in the agency. Um, these were 870Ps with bead on a pair of pedestal sights. Like I say, originally they were being handed out in a zippered pouch. I think the main reason the officers didn't get out with them, number one, was a complete lack of confidence in their ability to use the shotgun. Number two is we had a peculiar wording in our policy that we had to articulate that we felt we were outgunned with our pistol to justify getting out with the shotgun. And just you just have personnel that just, well, I don't have to articulate anything if I get out with the pistol.
It
And
was it was funny when we got patrol rifles. I want to say for the first 6 months, we had to write a memo
mhm,
detailing why we chose to deploy the deployment of the rifle and why we chose to deploy it every time. Now, the funny thing was we never had that with the shotgun. And we went through shotgun racks being on the passenger side, off the
mhm,
transmission hump to overhead, and then ultimately with a rifle rack between the two front seats.
yeah.
Right. But we never, early on it was you had to explain why the long gun came out, but you didn't have to explain why the shotgun came out.
Yeah, it was called shotguns were acceptable in law enforcement service. Then the patrol rifles were supposedly new, even though they
Yes.
really aren't. Um, yeah, back in those days, especially when we went to every vehicle having a shotgun in it, and we hot seated cars. There wasn't like
Mm.
individual patrol cars. You were supposed to, within the first hour of the shift, you were supposed to do a complete vehicle inspection to include checking all the fluids and everything. And you were also supposed to take the shotgun out and inspect it. And, you can imagine that didn't get done. And I took my shotgun out to inspect it one day on shift and found shells in the tube backwards.
Mhm.
I have no idea how long it rode in that particular car in that fashion.
Never mind a chambered shell with the
Mhm.
gun off safe. And
Yeah,
on the shotgun, the safety only blocks the trigger. It doesn't
right.
block the hammer, doesn't block the firing pin.
Yeah. Um, the three deployments, one was me, and I
Yeah.
obviously know what I'm doing with the shotgun. The other was another one of our firearms instructors, and he knew what he was doing with the shotgun. And the third one was a country boy, as Eric said, that grew up hunting, and he knew how to run the gun. And I'm pretty sure they've had more patrol rifle deployments than they ever had shotgun deployments. Of course, the patrol rifles have been in cars much longer now than the shotguns were. Because they got patrol rifles back 2007ish, I would say. So they've had raw rifles all that time. Um, but I tend to see much more confidence with people in the rifle than I do with the shotgun. And I think it's more from one, they're not scared of recoil, and number two is they're more familiar with how to run
Mhm.
It really does come down to manual of arms being
it.
fairly parallel with the current service gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, it was
And it's,
always interesting. Our shotgun qual started out with the gun and cruiser ready, which for us was safety on, hammer back,
Mhm.
which meant you had to bump the action bars. And the only thing that allowed people to pass the qualification was that they had 10 seconds to figure out how to rack the shotgun and get the safety off and fire two slugs. Uh, 10 seconds is a very generous time to make that happen. And it was every qual there was somebody there that would just completely brain fade and be trying to track the action, and then it wouldn't move. And yeah, just manual of arms is a bear.
And
and that's
go ahead, Eric.
no, go ahead.
In the agency shotgun qual that I wrote for the sheriff's office, they had to both successfully load and unload the shotgun. That was all part of it. And if you could not load your shotgun, it didn't matter whether you could shoot a passing score on
And it pains me to say anything nice about Hernley, but
it.
like I will say one thing I did steal from John is when I teach shotgun classes now I take a bunch of dummy rounds with me so
Mhm.
that everybody gets sufficient practice
Mhm.
clearing, loading, unloading the gun dry with dummies before we ever go live with it. Right. And I work, there's a lot of strings on the front end of the class that are done bolt closed on an empty chamber, weapon on safe, single
Mhm.
round in the mag tube to push them through the mechanics of working the action, getting around in the chamber.
My 1 day shotgun class, we spent up until lunchtime doing everything with dummy rounds. loading, unloading. We actually ran a lot of the drills with the dummy rounds. And then after lunchtime, we came back and repeated live fire. For one reason, it gave twice the repetitions with half the ammo being expended. But the other, it gave people the confidence to learn how to do everything without the fear of the recoil, and we could all walk around without ear pro on and everything, and you could work with people, on the shotguns and finding the shell latches to unload and everything else like that. It just made it easier.
Are you suggesting that we should teach manipulations without the guns exploding in our faces or something?
Yeah, yeah. It's almost like we shoot too much during shooting classes.
Again, I hate to give credit to Hearne Lee, but sometimes you got.
We'll find something else to blame him for.
And just a quick tip, if you are desperate, when I was very early starting, I wanted to do a shotgun block and we had no dummy rounds. You can actually take fired shells, stick a 3/4 inch dowel in there, whack it on a bandsaw and put a little bevel on the front, and voila, instant shotgun dummy rounds. Prop the primer cap out, throw a little silicone in there. I still have some of those dummy rounds that I probably made over 20 years ago now.
Yeah, or take them and cut them off at the ends and fill them up with silicone.
Yeah.
You can even, if you want to give them a little weight, put a little silicone in, drop a couple of nuts over in there, like metal nuts, and then fill them the rest of the way up with silicone and scrape it off at the end and let them set up overnight, and they work as dummy rounds.
Just do not buy the action proven dummies for gunsmiths and put those out with your students, because visually they look so much like a live shell
Yeah.
that you just don't want to create that confusion.
Oh, dude, the Remington dummy rounds that they give you in armorer school have shot in the front.
Yes,
I
Yeah.
mean, the only
same
thing
with
that's
Brownells.
different, yeah, is that there's no primer there. Like it's just a solid base. So yes,
Well, it's not
very
the
realistic looking.
it's not the action proven dummy rounds I worry about.
Yeah.
I worry about the number 8 shot loads from a couple companies that have translucent or clear hulls
Yeah.
getting into the mix.
Yeah.
Because
Someone made me a bunch of dummy shells, and they had actual shot in them, but no gunpowder and no primer. That I used for a while, and then finally, as the crimp began to start coming loose on those, I just went ahead and bought the orange ones.
Yep.
That it can't be mistaken for a shotgun shell, for an actual, I mean, for a live shell. Yeah, the weight's not there and some of the other stuff, but the safety factors improved. So, Eric, just could you give a rundown of what, if you're going to have a shotgun on duty, what are some of the things you need to do? And this would apply to private citizens.
yeah, for anybody, go out, spend some time with a pump action gun and a semi-auto gun, and get a comfort level for it. That's first. Figure out which one you want to invest the time in on. Right. Once you choose the gun, dealing with ATF and and the various titles for going short barrel shotgun or not. Right. If you want to go short barrel, that's fine. Just put the time and effort into doing it. If you want to look at some of these factory short barreled ones, right, like the TAC 13, TAC 14, or some of the other stuff, you can do that and put a stock on it and have a short barreled gun, right? But that's a whole separate discussion. Once you get that gun, be it an agency or an individual, get several different types of good commercial defensive double-aught buck. Number one, if it's available, even go out, pattern them 5 yards, 15 yards, 25 yards, not just one shell, but multiple shells from multiple manufacturers at those distances. See which holds the best pattern for you. I have a little that I really like. I like the Hornady Versatite, right? Because it's a little bit looser than the Federal Flight Control. But the last class I taught, at 15 yards, I had one of the shells patterned, 6 nice pellets here, and drop down low left, 2 pellets side by side. Like it wasn't a 9 pellet flyer. It was the 7th and 8th pellet being a flyer, just out of one shell. That a little bit odd, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to do that and see. Some of the reduced recoil loads will work in both pump and semi-auto. Some won't. You need to know that on the front end. Have a sighting system you can actually see, because within a bedroom with a lot of loads, you need to shoot that thing like a pistol, like a rifle. right? And then once you start going to a single projectile on the backside of it, you need to shoot that thing like a rifle with a good sight picture. Be able to attach a light to it. For most folks at home, that's far more important than being able to put a sling on the gun. For home defense, you probably don't need a sling on it. For LE, working with it, you absolutely need a sling on it because of all the other tasks that are going on. Learn to mount that gun without hurting yourself, which is fairly easy to do if you're willing to put the time and effort into it. Learn how to manipulate the gun, clear it, load it, unload it, learn how to work the safety on it. Learn if it has an action release or a shell release, learn how to work that, right? And incorporate that into your drills on the front end so that it's running at a subconscious level while you're processing what the problem is and how you're going to solve it. The select slug drills. I looked for a couple years and finally found one example. This was back in the teens of somebody who actually had done a select slug drill all the way to completion. It took me 2 years to find one example, and that was back in Tennessee. Very large West Coast Sheriff's Office a couple years ago had a deputy shoot somebody with a slug on patrol during the day. Their body-worn camera footage shows them completely unloading the shotgun before they load a slug in and solve the problem, versus just being able to get a slug into the gun, chamber it, and solve the problem.
Unload as in fired all of the buckshot out, or just completely took all the shot rounds
They
out?
mechanically
Okay.
removed every single double-aught buckload shell from the gun and then loaded slugs into it to solve the problem,
Okay.
versus just getting a slug into the gun, cycling it,
Yeah.
and ending the threat that was being posed. Know how to do those things, right? Take a class from somebody competent in it. I'm not talking about somebody who can shoot certain drills incredibly quickly, but somebody who actually understands what the gun can and can't do, and to show you how to do that. Not saying don't be able to shoot quickly. No, you need to be able, once you decided to solve the problem, solve it sooner. But speed is not always the be all end all with that gun.
Yeah. There's not that many shotgun problems that require 3 or 4 rounds being fired.
No.
Right.
And I've shot a couple shotgun matches in these 25, 30 round stages. While they're fun for competition, they bear almost no resemblance to anything you're actually going to do with that gun.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in the modern era, the cost of entry for a quality shotgun has just gotten outrageous.
Yeah, it's pushing $1,000 on the semi-auto side. On the pump side, especially because I would absolutely want the gun to go through Vang, if at all possible. If Vang has a solution for that make and model, I would want it on there. It's not cheap, I get it, right? But again, it's becoming a specialty weapon, not a general purpose weapon.
Well, they're almost like they're revolvers now. Revolvers are way more expensive than auto pistols, right? Because of the mechanical complexity and the lower production numbers. They really are almost occupying the same niche.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't have a use, it's just that not that many people know what to do with them. And they cost more because they're not used as much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially like what is a PSA AR going to cost you? $500? I mean,
and the one thing I would go back to is look at some of the case law decisions. And I get that case law decisions on law enforcement use of force may not apply to the general public, but I would for sure want to know how to use that gun against a moving target, how I do with that gun against a moving target. And I would also want to be able to use that gun while moving. Even though in a home defense situation, you're probably going to bunker up at a corner at a doorway and cover down a hallway, cover across a room. I would still want to add those two things into my training.
Yeah. As I was saying, the cost of entry on shotguns, unfortunately, I think is pushing them further and further into a niche. You can still find some agency trades that are in good shape to a certain degree, but those are getting harder to find now. And then you still got the cost of, okay, I got to put good sights on here. I got to do whatever. Most of the time, the stock is way too long. So you got the cost of changing the stock out, that kind of stuff. Whereas, John mentioned PSA. I had a PSA AR-15 for a long time that I think I had less than $600 in.
Yeah.
And I carried it on patrol. And
speaking of PSA,
yeah,
they have a shotgun coming out that's been shown at the last couple shot shows. It's supposed to hit this fall. They're calling it a 570. It's a
It
combination of
looks
the
pretty
best
cool.
parts of the Mossberg 590 and a Remington 870. There is a pump version and there is a semi-auto version, and they both work on the same receiver.
That's going to be interesting. I've seen some of their videos on those.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one hitting the market.
Yeah. Which, so, you know,
It's
some people turn their nose up at, say, the PSA AR. While I don't have mine, I sold it because someone needed it more than I did.
Mm.
I was perfectly well served with that gun. John, you were about to say something. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I lost it that fast. No, I say, there's I think it's these things fall out of service is something nobody appreciates anymore. It's just the joys of a tang safety and how that solves a lot of problems, whether
Mhm.
you're right-handed or wrong-handed.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I don't have to put up with that kind of hate and prejudice. Some of us held out in spite of the nuns beating us. The rest of you gave in way too early. But yeah, the safety on the Mossberg, I can't. It's hard to even argue against it, right? Like you can go with an upgrade on it, but for an agency, you don't have to worry about changing around the fire control group to work for those who are in their right mind. Left-handers.
Yeah, I would definitely, if I were going to run a Mossberg, I would upgrade to a safety with a steel detent in
Yeah.
it versus the plastic detent.
Yeah,
Just
the
because,
new safety is much larger and much better textured.
yeah.
And we have not been very controversial tonight, so allow me to take the heat, Lee, and remind everybody that if you had to pick an ideal patrol rifle for your typical street cop, an M1 carbine with the tang safety and an aim point and a flashlight would be everything you actually needed.
Yeah. It's not an AR-15. Yeah, we have to hit that drum, I think, every chance we get the opportunity to.
It's just a raw nerve that has to be poked. Let's just face it.
Yeah.
And when we have a
Mechanical.
chance, we'll discuss the 2 red dot failures we had in class this weekend. But
Oh,
that's your
okay.
Go ahead.
you're the dude that hates red dots more.
Yeah. I do hate ARs. I don't hate red dots.
So I have not had a red dot failure in a class this year. So I want to
Okay.
hear what happened this weekend.
I had in the New Orleans class, and apparently I did not know this, but it was I had one Trichicon yeet off. It's a Glock MOS with Glock screws. Both screws sheared and failed. In class this weekend, I was helping Tom with an instructor class. We had a very unexplained like 9-inch shift to the left as far as point of aim. I don't know which optic that was. And we had another, Glock MOS gun, shear screws, and yeet an optic. So the optics seem to be holding up fine. The mounting systems are not quite where they need to be.
And the one thing I'll say is the Glock MON regarding the Glock MOS system, Glock was told by some folks in the know way back when, like, don't do this. This is a horrible design, and they've gone forward with it. But like John says, the mounting seems to be the bigger deal, and I will try to quote Spalding. Dave says the thing that scares him the most about the red dots, right? Because we all know Dave hates red dots, is when they suddenly lose zero and you can't tell it.
Yeah. And I have experienced that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's one of the reasons why it took me forever to come back to Trujicon was my experience breaking a bunch of them with windage over a year.
Yeah. So. I'm pretty much in the camp that if I'm not going to carry it for serious purposes, it's going to have a name point on it.
Yeah.
Some description. Now I do have a Glock 19 with the Koa that I managed to get before the shortage really hit. I really like that mounting system, and I had plans to, by the end of this year, I was going to pick up a 48 Koa, and was probably going to divest myself of 365 macros and go back to the 48s in that role. And folk, I know some people are mad screaming at Glock over that, but it's a supply side problem on being able to get the optics. It's not the gun manufacturer. It's not that Glock saying, we don't want you to have these. It's, they have contracts that they have to fulfill.
Yep.
They're not getting enough optics coming in to have overruns where they can put those out on the market. They're not even selling them to individual officers right now, folks. They're having to fulfill contracts. They've actually sold that well that they can't meet their demand on the contracts out of them.
if you guys haven't seen it the last couple of days, Glock's been teasing some big announcement on the 27th. So that'll be Wednesday. I'm really interested in what that is. Is it going to be other manufacturers adopting the A cut, the mounting solution for the Koa, right? Or what that's going to be.
Well, I don't think Glock would tease other manufacturers having a cut.
No, I'm talking about pistol
Yeah.
manufacturers, sorry.
What's
Rather than
that?
I'm talking about pistol manufacturers adopting the
Yeah.
because
You
right,
said
Glock has had an exclusive
right,
agreement with Aimpoint for them to be the only ones to get the Koa, the only ones doing that A cut mounting.
right. So I thought that you said Glock was teasing an
No,
announcement.
I'm sorry, Aimpoint is teasing. If I said
Okay.
Glock, I apologize. No, it's Aimpoint teasing it.
Okay.
So
All
they're
right.
teasing something for Wednesday. It'll be interesting to see.
Well, the thing is, if they can't get on the Glock fast enough, they can't get on anybody else.
Yeah, I'm just like, okay, so what are they going to put out, right?
Yeah. Um, when the 48s with the Koas become available, that's what I will be going to for off-duty carry. But I've got my issue gun is a Glock 45 with an Acro P2 on it. I have a personally owned Glock 45 Acro P2. Both of those are direct factory milled. I have one of the Shadow Systems versions of a Glock 45 that is direct milled for an Acro P2, and then I've got that aim point Koa on the 19.
Mhm.
If I'm going out for serious purposes, it's probably going to have an aim point
Yeah.
on it. I do have EPS carry on 365 macro. The optic's been fine. The gun has functioned fine. I just don't shoot it to the same level that I shoot the 48. And that's the issue for me. And nothing against the gun itself at all. But yeah, it is what it is. I understand what Glock's going through with the supply. You can only do what you can do. All right. So the other issue that seems to be of interest of late that I thought we would talk about tonight is crime stats. Because John and I were actually tagged into a discussion about that earlier today. I know he's been on the range. I don't know if he's seen it yet or not. It's been in the news a lot with what's going on in DC. And which, by the way, John, aren't you retired and you're not having to go to DC to pull midnight shift patrol duty?
My agency is not cool enough to have been assigned to that detail yet. Now, if it goes on long enough, they'll probably be pulling people in. But right now, they're pulling in the sexy three-letter agencies, not the very plain Jane five-letter agencies yet.
I saw a news story this week where the Park Service Police have been activated.
Park police or park service?
Well, it's Park Police.
Yeah,
So
the
not
park
Park
police is
Service.
already there, dude.
Yeah.
So the other thing I'll just throw out historical context wise is I had a semi mentor that was retired park police, very high muckety muck. Back when crime was really bad, late 80s, early 90s, Metro turned over all of South DC to the US Park Police. So everybody wants to talk about this being some kind of unprecedented activity, but crime has gotten crazy in DC before. They've had to seek outside assistance. The only difference is, I guess, previously they actually asked for the help to try to make things better, and now they're doing everything to turn it down.
Yeah. And of course, DC is different than other cities. It is a federal district,
Mm-hmm.
and federal law does control this. And the federal government is completely within its power to come in and do what it's doing in DC. Uh, Not that I want the show to delve into politics on a regular basis, but it's a masterstroke politically because it is forcing, you know, the Democrats are coming out against solving crime.
Well, this was the question I posed in a couple text threads that
Yeah.
some of you guys are in. Is this going to be a reverse consent decree? Right. So instead of the federal government coming in and telling you you're doing unconstitutional policing, we're going to rein you in and restrict you. Or are we now going to have a situation where the federal government comes in and says, you're not doing your jobs, officers, admin, prosecutors, corrections. We're going to come in and tell you how you're going to actually police, and we're going to make you go out and start taking bad guys to jail and having a system that holds them accountable. Right. I think this is interesting, and I posed this before we started getting the president and some of his
Mhm.
staff, cabinet officials, talking about going into other cities and doing this.
Well,
Well,
this, you know,
the legal precedent is there to do it in DC.
Right.
I don't know under what legal theory, without being requested, they can come in and just take over other municipalities because they're not doing their job. That's different than the consent decree, where they're violating certain civil rights statutes and the like.
allegedly.
Allegedly, there's
Allegedly,
been a lot of proof that it's alleged on the
right?
consent decree stuff. I
Right.
think there's an argument to be made that government's responsibility is the safety of the public.
Right.
And if local officials are abdicating it, I think there's an argument to be made that you're violating the civil rights of the decent, normal human beings if you can pursue them for allegedly violating the civil rights of the crooks.
And
You're going to have to link it to something civil rights to give the federal government the authority to come in without being
Well,
requested to do so.
I there are folks out there making an argument that the federal government overstepped with consent decrees, and
Oh, yeah.
especially right. I'm just saying, are we seeing
Mhm.
a potential reverse consent decree where the federal government's coming in telling you you need to start being the police again?
John, you got anything?
I say, what Eric's talking about, for some people may not know, is that the federal government, under the auspices of civil rights violations, has repeatedly come in and put various large agencies under this thing called a consent decree, where they're being monitored for civil rights violations. They're basically, the department is being semi-run by an official. There
Mhm.
have been lots of allegations that there's absolutely no statistical basis for the decisions made by the Department of Justice. I'm drawing a blank on the gentleman's name, but he's gone and done the research, and there's two concerns.
Bob, Bob Seals, Bob Sears, Bob
So
something like
Sears
that.
sounds right, but the problem is that the cities generally roll over. Interestingly enough, Lee, I don't know if you're aware of this. One of the few times that the Department of Justice tried to put in a consent decree, they actually tried to do it with an elected sheriff, and he told them to go pound sand, and they went away, which I found greatly amusing.
There was another
But
one
when
where a county took it to trial and won.
Yeah. But what nobody wants to talk about, and we know very conclusively from the research, is that consent decrees end up with increases in crime. There's always an increase in homicides, and it's amongst the minority populations that the Department of Justice claims that it's protecting. So it's one of those things where the very much law of unintended consequences rearing its ugly head, and you're literally getting the exact opposite of what you claim is your desired result.
Yeah. Of course, the whole thing in DC has only been going for a week, and they're reporting, drastic, uh, decreases in the part warrant crimes. It remains to be seen if that will
Well,
carry over.
Mhm.
again, historical context. I can't remember how many years back. It's probably been 10. Everybody forgets that a lot of the Indian reservations are federal enclaves and subject to federal law. There was one summer that I can't remember under which president this was. They said, we're not doing this anymore. And they sent in a series of rotations of the special teams at whether it was the Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, BLM, anybody that had any kind of a crowd control, and they literally policed the bejesus out of the reservations all summer long, and did not have a single homicide all summer. Did really good job. But fall comes around, all the teams go away, and all of a sudden the homicides go right back up. I think that right now DC has gone 11 days without a homicide, which is pretty amazing given how many homicides they've been having. And
And
you
they've been
are in a
pushing.
difficult position if you're a politician going, well, 11 days is too long without a homicide. We should have more of our citizens dying in the streets. I mean, that's the
Right.
interesting position that they're in.
And I think they were pushing like 300 a year on
Oh,
average.
yeah.
So almost one a day.
Yeah. And so politically, that creates a very interesting dynamic. Usually, the party that is in control of the White House loses seats at the midterm election. And of course, the current occupant of the White House doesn't do things in the usual way. And I think we're really seeing it again. I don't want the show to become a political show. I do think we're seeing a dynamic where the Democrats are going way overboard on trying to protect illegal immigrants, and now they're trying to stop efforts to actually reduce crime, and they're creating the own wall that they're going to die on.
Yeah.
As I think what's happening now. John and I were tagged in a conversation in a group today where someone was asking about who defines crimes and how can an agency go about downgrading crimes. And I'm going to answer that in part here. And then I'm going to ask John to talk about some of the stuff that he studied. Number one, the actual crimes are defined by your various state legislatures and the federal legislature, or legislature and tour in the federal sense. Um, for instance, the crime of burglary is just defined by the state of Georgia. I'm in Georgia. We have two levels of burglary: burglary one and burglary two. Burglary two is whenever someone enters or remains in a building that is not a dwelling for the purpose of committing a felony or theft therein. All right, that's the definition of burglary as handed down by the Georgia General Assembly. Now, how do you report the crimes? Say we have a theft that takes place in an office building. The simplest crime to prove is theft by taking, which is in Georgia is a misdemeanor or felony depending on the dollar amount of what was stolen. I can prove theft by taking if the theft occurred. To prove burglary two, I would have to prove that someone entered the office building to commit with the intent to commit the theft. So simple. Those things tend to get reported as a theft by taking when they could actually be a burglary too. And that's just a very rudimentary example of where an agency makes the decision on how they're going to report that crime. Um, Article 1, Section A of the United States Constitution gives the government, federal government, certain enumerated powers. The 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution limits the federal government to those enumerated powers, and none of the enumerated powers give the federal government to order state and local agencies to report crime stats to the federal government. Um, Reporting crime statistics has always been voluntary as far as reporting them to the federal government. Uh, Typically, they get compliance with that by linking it to grant money. An agency may not receive a federal grant if its crime stats are not up to date. And so if an agency is not pursuing federal grants, then they have no reason to submit crime stats. As such, the media tends to, they tend to grab the federal FBI's crime stats and say, this is the crime rate of the United States. That's typically underreported. And John, I want to turn it over to you now.
So there's several factors that drive all this. Let's just give the hard numbers first. Starting around 2020, the FBI had a long-term project in which they wanted to improve the quality of the crime data that was being reported. So we moved from the Uniform Crime Report to a system called NIBRS. That transition was ugly and horrible, and a lot of agencies did not play along well. Nobody thinks the crime data for 2021 is very good and will ever be accurate. We know I've got the numbers here. In 2021, only 70% of the agencies reported their crime data, covering 66% of the population. In 2022, they got 83% of the agencies covering 90% of the population. And in 2023, we allegedly have 95% of the population now being covered by NIBRS. Their problem is just the accuracy of the data overall. So most criminologists will tell you that we have the best numbers for homicide because it's really hard to hide the bodies. So we know how many homicides the FBI reports versus other alternative sources. Now, we only have the source for homicide, but the Centers for Disease Control has mandatory reporting. And those numbers for homicide are much more accurate than the FBI numbers. If you compare year to year, the FBI numbers versus the CDC numbers, the FBI is missing 20 to 24% of the homicides which are taking place in the country. If they are missing 20 to 24% of the most serious crimes which are occurring, we can only speculate about what that delta is between the less serious crimes as far as that stuff goes. John Lott I was trying to find the specific article, but he's done a really good job in his crime research. I think it's crime research or crimeprevention.org, documenting the inaccuracy of the statistics. For instance, the FBI doesn't even have accurate numbers compared to agencies. A classic example, I'm actually sitting here in Nashville. Nashville has its own crime stats online. And you can look at what Nashville says happens and compare it to what's in the FBI records, and they don't even match up. Like the FBI isn't even accurately reporting the data that was submitted to them. So we have just, for lack of better words, potential clerical errors, just getting the data where it needs to be. That is before the agencies begin to put their thumbs on the scale to try to make themselves look better. Agencies have been caught cooking the books all the time. I mean, it just takes one Google search. I don't care whether Chicago, especially, was infamous for this. Most recently, it caught a lot of national attention. DC has been caught of doing this. Kind of these large scale events where, in DC, you're showing up to somebody that was attacked with a knife, and a lieutenant or a captain, shows up on scene and tells them to report that as an injury that was transported by ambulance. That's not even a crime going into the system. That kind of stuff had been going on. Apparently, it's just going on a larger scale there. The example I always like to use is, my wife was a young patrol officer. They respond to a fight in a bar. And in this particular instance, one patron had taken a beer bottle, smoked another patron in the head, shattering the beer bottle, knocked the patron on the floor. The dude that struck him jumped on top of him with a broken beer bottle and was about to tenderize his face. When the bouncers grabbed a hold of him, pulled him off, the dude on the floor got smoked with the beer bottle, knocked unconscious, transported to the hospital by ambulance, right? So they get all that secured. They go back to the police station to fill out the paperwork. And my wife foolishly checks aggravated assault, because aggravated assault is typically grievous bodily injury, typically involving a weapon. And her FTO is like, oh, no, 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 no. That was a simple assault. Now, I don't know what that motivation was. We can't always paint it as a negative. It could be that they wanted to pad the numbers, and aggravated assault is a violent crime and makes the city look bad. Or it could simply be that that officer is tired of submitting stuff to the district attorney's office and having it turned down. So he goes, look, we're not getting anything more than a simple assault on this. So we're not going to spend any more effort than the system is going to allow us to do. Irregardless of what the motivation was, that was an aggravated assault that was not counted as such. And it's a small thumbs on the scale, or sometimes I guess your whole butt on the scale, that agencies have been playing around with and repeatedly getting caught. So cooking the books, for lack of a better word, can happen on a small scale. It can happen on a large scale. We definitely know it's happening when it goes out there. So when you combine that with just a clerical lack of accuracy on a national level, it's really hard to put a lot of faith in the numbers as anything but an absolute minimum number of crimes taking place.
And of course, you also can't rule out incompetence.
Oh, incompetence is always in play.
Yep. There's always the pressure. We need to reduce crime, and well, it's easy to reduce crime if we just reduce what we report. And that's why the big cities do it, even why small cities do it.
Yeah.
And you have to look at what gets reported.
Yeah.
Because there's substantial research out there that says there's a whole lot of folks who don't call law enforcement to begin with. Now,
the
dead body with a bullet hole in it, the dead body with a bullet hole in it's a little bit harder to argue, not report, because we end up coming across that. But it's all the other stuff where they choose not to make the call to begin with.
Yeah. Bureau of Justice Statistics asks their respondents. Bureau of Justice Statistics is a very large survey of the population. They ask people that experienced a victimization, did you report it to the police? And literally less than half of the serious crimes that occur in this nation are actually reported to the police. Some of that is because maybe they're interfamily, interpersonal crimes. Maybe they're something in the neighborhood where we'll settle that later. But anytime you look at the number of murders, the number of aggravated assaults, it's very easy to probably, easily double some of those numbers. as far as what's actually happening in the country right now.
Yeah, one other thing I do want to throw out, for a brief period here in Georgia, um, well, let me back up. Up until several years ago, we just had one simple charge of burglary. There was no burglary, first degree, second degree. In a quote, what Georgia called criminal justice reform, which was actually let's get people out of prisons reform. Um, so, because it costs less, uh, the crime of burglary, second degree, was created. For a short period there, one of the elements of burglary, second degree, also matched what was our entering auto statute. Entering auto was basically burglarizing a car. Um, the penalty for burglary too was higher than the penalty for entering auto. And so one of my investigators started charging people that were basically committing entering auto, started charging them with burglary too, because it carried a higher penalty. Well, lo and behold, that comes to light in the next sheriff's election, and we had opposition who started hammering us with the fact that our burglary numbers had risen. And so I got to look at it, and where our burglary numbers had risen, where this one investigator was charging entering autos as burglary too, rather than entering auto. And I had to go sit down in his cube and go, dude, I appreciate what you were trying to do. I understand it. You're not in any trouble. This is not a angry chat whatsoever. But from now on, these are entering autos. And then later, the legislature fixed that thing because it was happening other places. Like, no, 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 we screwed up. That's not what we meant. And they took those elements out of burglary too. So, how do they get defined? That's how they get defined. John, you said something pre-show about response rates.
Yeah, so sometimes we have to do large scale studies to, I guess, validate what we already know. And one of the things that, people with questions, do police response times matter? And we now have pretty good data that police response times do, as far as making sure crimes get cleared more effectively, as far as that stuff goes. But one of the things that seems to really drive response times is just staffing. Again, less cops, longer response times. And the average person out there doesn't appreciate how long it takes for the police to get there. So, like I said, we were having this discussion in class. I'm in Nashville, and I got to give them credit, dude. They keep all their stats out there where anybody can look them up. So you think, somebody gets shot in the street, something like that, that there will be an immediate response by the police. I've got last year's numbers for the Nashville and Davidson County, the Metro Police Department. Their average response time to a shooting is 6.8 minutes, which doesn't sound that bad to you. Realize that averages are made by clumping together a bunch of small numbers and a bunch of really large numbers. So that probably means sometimes they're getting on scene in 5 minutes, sometimes they're getting on scene in 12 minutes. So a lot of people think that somehow calling 911 freezes the actions, makes everybody magically teleport to solve their problems. And that does not happen. Just doing some quick comparisons online compared to other places, those response times are pretty good on a national scale. Serious or 911 response calls to, crimes in progress can be as much as 18 minutes in some jurisdictions. So we're in this nasty spiral where we've had the war on police, the defunding the police, the spiral of increasing crime, spiral of, less cops being less able to recruit confident people to do the job. It just does not seem that we're on a good track as far as that stuff goes. The other thing I was going to throw out there is the thought. We were talking earlier about the policing in DC. Until you do something with the prosecutors, it doesn't matter. The police can catch all the people they want to catch. The police are fully capable of doing that, but they're not going to do that if they know they're going to go out and risk their lives, and the judge is going to release them. I would say that New York State's experiment in bail reform has been a fairly large failure as far as that stuff goes. We've had this kind of poorly conducted experiment in criminal justice reform. We're seeing that it's not working. California, repealed Prop 47 with a different prop, but the state in the Pacific Northwest that, voted to legalize, hard drugs has had to back off on that. I want to say that same state. I saw a graph I've got saved talking about, they legislated how they're going to handle police pursuits, and their number of stolen vehicles skyrocketed as soon as the legislators repealed the limits that they put on police pursuits. Guess what happens to car thefts? Boom, right back down. So again, we've got these people that have these theories of this utopian worldview about how we can make everything better that are not being held up, and we're actually practicing them, practically in the field and seeing what happens.
And Utah had that tragedy last Sunday night, a week ago, where 2 officers were murdered, a third was wounded, a K9 was wounded. Local media coverage has indicated that the suspect in that had numerous prior assault arrests with numerous prior dismissals by the court system. Now, is that the prosecutor or is that the judge? Don't know, but that's been the media coverage. I haven't seen the guy's rap sheet to be able to tell you one way or another, but it's sure being reported.
Yeah, I can tell you. Go ahead, John.
I said, I'll throw out the topic. Everybody gets upset about police officers getting qualified immunity. I don't want to hear anybody talking about qualified immunity until we get rid of the absolute immunity that judges and prosecutors enjoy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, the judicial district in which I have spent my entire career, for the last 4 years, had a quote Soros DA in it. Now, this individual I like on a personal level. She's someone I enjoy sitting down and having political discussions with. Very nice, personable person. She was in the legislature as a Democrat for 1 year. Due to getting in as a special election, she got defeated at the next one. Came back and through an odd set of circumstances ended up winning a special election runoff that was on a different day as the special election runoff for our United States Senate race. She got in, held office for 4 years, completely mismanaged the office. Got down to at one point in time, it was her and 3 ADAs, and they're supposed to have, I think, 13, and I may be wrong on that number. Was letting crimes simply go unprosecuted whatsoever. And it created a backlash in numerous things. I had a lot of activist groups that typically weren't on the cop side all of a sudden got on the cop side. But it also impacted the way the cops responded to calls. Like, what's the point of jumping through all the hoops if she's just not going to prosecute the case? And here's the thing: nobody really cares if a drug dealer gets away with selling drugs, but they care when child molesters start walking free. And ultimately, she was trounced at the next election. And we've got a guy in that seems like he knows what he's doing, but it's going to take him at least a term to get out from under the mess that he inherited. We have 4 Superior Court judges, and when all 4 Superior Court judges sign an open letter to the district attorney, like the previous one received, yeah, basically saying you are incompetent, you don't know what you're doing, and it's causing problems of the system. It is so bad that I know of one defense attorney who had a client that wanted to accept a plea, and the DA's ADA assigned did not know how to fill out the charging document correctly. And so the guy's own defense attorney wrote up the prosecution's paperwork so that the guy could properly be charged so that he could plea out. Because the case was just languishing, and the guy was willing to plead to the charge, so his own lawyer wrote the paperwork that he could plead guilty to it. Folks, you can't underestimate the level of incompetence that there is out there through all the system, and sometimes incompetence is the answer to your questions.
What's the line? Never ascribe to malice, but what can be attributed to incompetency?
Yeah, it's oftentimes when I look at conspiracy theories, I find the elaboration, the elaborate planning and execution and everybody being quiet about it that would have to happen for a conspiracy to take place when all it really takes is somebody to screw up.
Yeah.
That's simple. That's simple. Mhm. John, you got anything else smart to say?
Not at this time. I withhold my smart stuff for later.
Okay. Well, what's that over your right hand shoulder?
Okay. Real quickly, that is the TACMAN target. Let me. By the way, you get weird looks. This was a trading target, really popular starting since the 1990s. They kind of disappeared off the market since COVID and other issues. I ended up traveling to Canada. I bought the tooling to manufacture those, so I'm returning those back to the market. Working as I'm going to be a wholesale distributor, manufacturer for those. Action Target has bought some. I'm working with Gun Fund. I think they're going to pick them up as well. So if you need a reasonably cost alternative for a 3D shooting target, that's him back there.
I get all kind of, well, not all kinds, but a few people angrily email me every week about the audio of the show. And when you get up and walk away from the laptop and the mic, it doesn't help, John.
I'm not sure I'm supposed to be concerned about the complaints that you get.
You started to say
I like to think I might be a source of some of them.
something
A
about,
source, try the source.
yeah, something about you get strange looks and then you turned your back to the camera and walked across your hotel room.
So you get strange looks when you bring that up the elevator. But
That's because you're
there's
cuddling with
nothing
it.
in my existence that is meant to make your life easier, Lee.
And for those of you that are listening to this on the audio thing, it's a three-dimensional uh, target that John is going to
Naked male
manufacture.
torso.
Yeah,
Yeah.
male torso from about the hips up.
It's better than the PowerPoint that he created for teaching people sight picture that is not suitable for showing public audiences.
Probably up there with my discussion of trigger control, which we'll leave for another day.
Yeah. All right. Eric, what do you have upcoming?
Oh God, good stuff. So Thunderstick Summit is coming up the end of September at the Staccato Ranch Range outside of Las Vegas in Pahrump. Then I've got Shotgun in Dallas, Red Dot Pistol at CMP in Talladega. Then
Talladega.
Talladega, Alabama. Then we're doing Red Dot classes with Armed Women of America in Utah. Come November, I will be teaching pistol mounted optics instructor to a federal agency down in the Southwest. If you're anywhere remotely near Las Vegas and you want to take the pistol mounted optics instructor class, hit up the website cougarmountsolutions.com. The class is a go, but I've got plenty of room for other folks to jump into it. December is right now is Mead Hall for 2 different shotgun classes and a red dot optics class. That one's going to be the practical application side. That's a lot of movement and moving targets in that one. And then hopefully I hear from some agencies about low light instructor classes coming up to the end of the year and into next year. And I've already got stuff starting to book for next year. It's posted on the website.
John?
Let's see. I will be teaching Range Master Instructor Development in lovely Kankakee, Illinois next weekend. You can still sign up. I'll be teaching Who Wins up in the Philly area coming up. That's on the website. Combative Pistol is filled up. I do have plenty of openings in classes up at Mead Hall for later this fall. Those should be some good times as far as that goes. I am starting to book 26. I think I've got 2 dates in Florida. And in am already regretting I have a February booking in Chicago on a nice indoor range, but I will be in Chicago in February.
That's a nice facility. I taught there 2 months ago.
Facility is great. The dudes that run it are kind of sketchy, but
Actually, what? No, they're fine. They're good people.
That was an inside joke, people.
It was.
All right. Well, the only things I have coming up is the one that you two failed to mention, the Cognitive Conclave,
Oh, yes.
the last weekend in October here in Georgia, and there are only 4 tickets remaining for that event. So if you're wanting to go, to attend, you better hurry. Now they're dealing no dally. I'm already getting. So when are you doing another one of these? We don't know. It's been 2 years since we did the previous one, so we shall see.
Selling
Uh,
out would be the first thing to ensure there's a third one.
there you go. There you go.
You
Um,
and your logic.
Rangemaster reunion in December, and then it gets into 26. And all I've got so far for 26 is a couple of conferences. Uh, at some point, I presume I will start back offering open enrollment classes. But when I teach all day, every day, sometimes I just don't want to people on the weekends. It's hard to get me to people anyway, but yeah, maybe I was tossing around some ideas this weekend for some new stuff, but we'll see. Anyway, to my two compatriots tonight, I thank them for spending their time with us tonight, and to the audience, I know that your most important asset is your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with us.